In this video, our goal is to create child blueprints of the BP Samurai to also make the enemy character move into the screen. The first thing you want to achieve is make the enemy character slide in from the right and not from the left like our player. And having a child blueprint allows us to change properties here, so we can simply set the slide start position to plus 150 instead of minus 150 to achieve this. However, later on the player will have many input configurations, while the enemy will have an AI system implemented, which is why we want to split these blueprints. Inheritance is a pretty loaded topic and there are entire books written about this, and we could talk about this for hours. However, I just want to give you a quick and easy to understand explanation that is enough for you to understand how to use it with blueprints. Inheritance isn't just an Unreal Engine thing, but it's actually a thing you are familiar with if you know about computer science, since it's related to object-oriented programming. So learning and understanding this will actually help you in many ways as a developer. In our case, what we want to create is a parent class or parent blueprint, which is the BP Samurai, which we already created. This could be any type of samurai. And we then want to create two child classes or blueprints, if you will, of this. One being the BP Samurai player, which is the Tanuki, and one being the BP Samurai NPC, which is the Toad. By the way, the website I'm using here is called Figma and it's free to use, and I often use it to plan out my games. So what this does is, it allows us to create certain properties and functions on the parent, which are then passed down to the children. So we don't have to create the same like slide in timeline again for this character, and then again from scratch for this character. We can simply create it once on the BP Samurai, and it's then going to be passed on to both of these blueprints. So for example, we have the slide start position, which is a variable on our BP Samurai. It's this one, the vector, which we set to minus 150. And we also have the slide in custom event or function, which you can see here, the slide start pos minus 150 and slide in. Attack, die are some things we haven't created yet, but we will create later. And we can also change the properties on the children. So for example, for the NPC, the slide start position is going to be plus 150 instead of minus 150. And the sprite is not going to be the Tanuki, but the sprite is going to be the Toad. And since we have the child, we can use the pattern that the parent created for us, but we can change the properties like this, which makes it very easy to create variants. And the slide in, attack, and die are going to stay the same here, but instead we're going to have an AI controller and many things like that that allow the NPC to attack automatically. And on the side of the Samurai player, the slide start position is going to be the same, the sprite is going to be the same, the functions are all going to be the same, but here we will have a input controller, which handles the inputs of the player. So we can basically have things that are shared on the parent that are going to be passed down, but we can then change certain properties and also add things that are unique to the child blueprint, like the AI controller in this case, and the input controllers for the player character. And I hope that gave you a simple understanding of how we can use inheritance. Again, like this is a very loaded topic and we could talk about this for hours and hours, but I think this is enough for you to understand why we use this and how it can be useful. And now we're going to start to implement this so you can actually see it in action. Later on, one thing you could do is again create a child of the Samurai NPC and create different enemy types with different attack speeds and again different sprite art. So yeah, you can create children of children and you can just work down the tree multiple times. And this is something you can really think about deeply and plan out to create a very nice workflow for yourself. However, it's also pretty hard to plan this out, so this is just something you'll get used to as you become more experienced. So open up the content drawer, right click the BP Samurai and create child blueprint class. And I'm going to call this BP Samurai player, which is the first one. And right click again, create child blueprint class, BP Samurai NPC. So for the player, we don't have to change anything at this point, since it will use the Tanuki and it's going to slide in from the left. But we want to replace this blueprint. We could just delete this and drop the other one in, but I'm going to show you a different way. We can select the BP Samurai player, right-click the one that's in the scene, and replace selected actor with our BP Samurai player. And everything still looks the same, but if we look here, you can see it's now using the BP Samurai player. Again, if you couldn't follow along with this, you could also just delete it and drop it into the scene. It works just the same way. But you'd have to find the right position again. And let's now do the same thing with the NPC. So we can select our NPC here, then right-click, and replace selected actors with BP Samurai NPC. And you see that it turns into the Tanuki now, because we still didn't set up the sprite and everything. So open up the content drawer and double-click our BP Samurai NPC. And we can grab it here and put it in here. So the first thing we want to do is go to the paper sprite. And for the source sprite, we want to select, we can just look for Toad and go for Toad idle sprite. And compile and save. And we can see that it's now the Toad. But if we start the game, it's going to slide in from the left, which we don't want. It should slide in from the right. So we can again go into the BP Samurai NPC and select the pawn, the one which is on top, and then we can see in the details panel the slide start position variable we created before. And we want to set this to 150 and press enter. And now we can compile and save again, go to the map and start. And you can now see that our character slides in from the right. And this is already looking really nice. But again, you can see that the colors are a bit off and they actually change once we start the game, which is due to auto exposure. Again, we're going to change this once we have the camera in our scene. So I hope this lesson gave you an overview of how we can use inheritance and child blueprints to easily create variations of our characters and also other things. In later lessons, we're going to do even more changes to these to input the AI controller and also the player controls. But in the next video, we want to set up our game mode and the rules for the game.